Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View. Sometimes it's sort of a party here at the studios of Point of View, and I'm looking at the website and remembering a couple of days ago when I was hosting, and Josh McDowell was my guest. And after we were done, we really spoke the first hour of the program, and it was a lot of fun. He stayed, and he had brought in a beautiful fabric Torah Pentateuch scroll, of which he owns the actual original scroll. He's had it printed on a fabric scroll, and there was so much excitement around here around that I don't know how long he stuck around. I had to come back in the studio and finish the show. But that video is actually up on the Point of View website at pointofview.net. You can check that out. It reminds me of how much fun it can be. Now, today I'm sitting here with this big round table and lots of people across windows doing their work. Catherine's there as the producer, and Rob is there watching me to make sure I don't make any mistakes. Andrew is working the board, and Chris is working the cameras, because if you go online, you do get to actually watch us do this show, which means I've got to put mascara on in the morning and all sorts of things. Anyway, I just kind of want to tell you what it's like here for a person who sits in once in a while for a few days in a row. That's what I'm doing. It's been a lot of fun. And we have talked a lot this week about the marriage case that was argued before the Supreme Court. And that's a big part of what we're about. We're in the midst of our Pray for America campaign. I have Point of View's Outlook, which many of you have received as you get our mail. And it encourages people to pray for America. There are a couple of great articles, one by Kirby, one by Warren Kelly in there. We are all throughout the shows. We're encouraging you to pray for America, especially for the Supreme Court justices, as now they make this momentous decision. No, they're not going to change marriage for us as believers because it's God's institution. It predated our Constitution and laws. But the good that marriage does in the culture could be stripped away if they open it up and change it and make it something that God did not intend it to be. So that is our prayer. And, it's interesting as we talk about gender so much. I found the sweetest article. Someone actually found this for me years ago, and I've kept it in a file. And I'm pulling it out now because in my family, there are a couple of new babies that are going to be born in the next few months. And so I got to see the sonogram of one of them this morning. I think it's about a 17-week-old baby that I saw. It's so exciting. And so this article came out of the Dallas Morning News back in 2007, but it talks about moms, expectant moms, and the way God made the differences between men and women for various purposes. And this one is entitled, Spine Helps Mom Balance Big Belly. Differences in vertebra, hip, joint, and keep pregnant women from tipping over. So the article says, with all that growing weight up front, how is it that pregnant women don't lose their balance and topple over? Well, the answer is there are slight differences between women and men in one lower back vertebra and a joint in the hip. Those are just slight differences between men and women. These allow women to adjust their center of gravity. This is what scientists say. This evolutionary engineering is seen only in female humans and our immediate ancestors, who walked on 2 feet. It's not seen in chimpanzees and apes, though. Okay. according to a study published in today's journal Nature. So this is only seen in human women. She knows is the next category in this article. There's a big load that's pulling you forward, says Lisa Shapiro, an anthropology professor at the University of Texas, and the only one of the study's 3 authors who has been pregnant herself. At least in 2007, that was the case. She says, you experience discomfort. Maybe it would be a lot worse if the design changes were not there. So these 2 pregnant women that I know, they've had some discomfort, and part of it is just because things are different now. Some of the muscles that were not being pulled on, are being pulled on now. But it's interesting that these particular differences are there for the benefit of women. Harvard anthropology researcher Catherine Whitcomb found 2 physical differences in male and female backs that until this point had gone unnoticed. One lower lumbar vertebra is wedge-shaped in women and more square in men. A key hip joint is 14% larger in women than men when body size is taken into account. So that means, at least according to these researchers, they did some engineering tests, and they show how these slight differences allow women to carry the growing load without toppling over, and typically without disabling back pain. I mean, some of you have had back pain, but most of us have not. I did not. 3 pregnancies without that. So I guess that I can thank God and just the way he made our backs for that. Walking on 2 feet separates humans from most other animals, says this article. And while anthropologists still debate the benefit of walking on 2 feet, well, that's the way we're made, so that's the way we're going to walk. There are notable costs such as pain for pregnant females. The back changes appear to have evolved, they say. These are folks who believe in evolution, to overcome the cost of walking on 2 feet. Well, anyway, we were made that way. Here's the question about men. What about men with stomachs the size of babies or bigger? You know, the beer gut. Who keeps them from toppling over? Well, their back muscles are used to compensate, but that probably means more back pain, theorized Dr. Shapiro. She said it would be a fun study to do, to look at men with beer bellies to see if they shift their loads. So, ladies and gentlemen, just one way in which men are different from women. And thank you to my friend Julie, who gave this to me in 2007. I'm pulling it out now, and I think it's a fun time to share it. One reason it is because later in the program, Elaine Donnelly is going to join me. She is with the Center for Military Readiness, and we are going to talk about this concerted push by the Obama administration to bring women into combat positions in the military. They're doing lots of testing right now in the armed forces to see how women do on some of these tests. They keep promising they're not going to gender norm anything, which means that everybody will meet the same standards, which means, and it's very possible, even according to our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, it's very possible that some of the standards for physical fitness for the military and physical abilities will be changed to accommodate women. He's saying if these standards are not necessary, if they deem them unnecessary, they will throw them out so that women can meet the standards and be in combat. To me, that's a little scary. We're going to talk with Elaine Donnelly about that. I also have joining me later Clare Lopez, because we haven't talked for a while about the Iran deal that's out there being negotiated, and now our Congress is trying to get itself to weigh in on it. But will they even be strong enough when they do? She's got a lot of great information for us on that particular point. And then I'm so excited for this interview with Reverend David Roseberry from Christ Church, Anglican Church here in the area. It's an encouraging message. I heard it on Sunday. I asked him to come to join me by phone today, just to kind of share it with you, because we are in some challenging times for Christians, and we need the Good Shepherd is what we need. And most of our culture is unmoored from a Christian worldview. So how do we operate in these times? I think we need some encouragement there, and he's going to provide that later in this hour. Well, next up, we're going to open the phones, 800-351-1212, talk about what's happening in Baltimore, Maryland. We'll be right back.
The Point of View Commentary with Kirby Anderson.
If a celebrity couple separates, should the couple's frozen embryos be destroyed or put up for adoption? This is a question surrounding the actress Sofia Vergara. She is best known for her role in the TV program Modern Family or for her furniture commercials. She is now in the spotlight over a bioethics issue. She and her ex, Nick Loeb, have 2 frozen embryos that were created when they were still in a relationship. They aren't in a relationship now, so Nick Loeb brought a lawsuit against Sofia Vergara because he doesn't want the embryos destroyed, but she doesn't want the frozen embryos implanted in her. Some of this might be a publicity stunt since there's no evidence that Sofia Vergara wants to destroy the embryos. Her lawyer said she never suggested she wanted to have the embryos destroyed. And there is a section in the contract that states that unless otherwise directed by both of us in writing, in person, or by notarized letter, the center shall continue to store the cryopreserved material for an indefinite period of time. This celebrity spat illustrates a larger issue. She does not want the baby, and he, and perhaps she, doesn't want the embryos destroyed. We need King Solomon to help resolve this moral impasse. Of course, I've already mentioned one possibility, embryo adoption. An infertile couple could adopt these frozen embryos and begin the adoption journey 9 months earlier with pregnancy and childbirth. This may be the only pro-life solution to this moral dilemma. We aren't talking about frozen sperm or eggs that have 23 chromosomes. We're talking about frozen embryos that have 46 chromosomes. Everything a human being needs genetically is already present in these frozen embryos. If you don't like the moral dilemma and the ethical circumstances surrounding these frozen embryos, you're not alone. That is why we need to think through the implications before we create embryos in the laboratory and then freeze them for future use. These frozen embryos are currently in legal and medical limbo. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter, and we have a packed show today, several topics. And I hope I can shoehorn them all in. If not, I'll ask Kirby to perhaps cover them tomorrow. Actually, I'll be here with him, so maybe I can lean on him to do so. But I think tomorrow is going to be very much consumed with religious liberty because Kelly Shackelford will be here and we'll be talking about some of the oral arguments from his perspective from the Supreme Court's marriage case this week. And so I just want to cover some of these other things because it's not like there's not a lot happening around the country. One of the things that's happening in Washington, D.C. is the Congress is looking at passing this Corker-Menendez bill, which they watered down quite a bit to get agreement on. And it instead, the new version of it, it has to do with Iran. And the new version of it shortens the amount of time that Congress has to review a nuclear agreement with Iran. Congress wants to weigh in. They don't want the president to make this agreement and the State Department, John Kerry and everyone, to make the agreement without their approval because they fear that we're going to give away the store. And this relationship with Iran is just such a different relationship than many people are used to or expect. I mean, just considering all of its activities. The other thing that that happened to the congressional bill to weaken it, it was stripped of a requirement that the president would need to certify Iran does not directly support or has not directly supported an act of terrorism against Americans. So they don't have to not sponsor terrorism around the country in order for us to lift our sanctions on them. And it allows the administration to submit the text of an agreement 30 days after the June 30th deadline for final negotiations. We'll ask our guest Clare Lopez about these. She's got 2 articles that we posted at pointofview.net having to do with the Iran lobby and how it sidetracked the nuclear talks. And we've already got calls, but they're not on these issues. I will take your call, though, in a moment. Because it's kind of everything's on the table today. So, again, our number is an open line, 800-351-1212. But just before I get to what's happening in Baltimore, and things are settling down, but the problem is escalating. There's one piece in the Wall Street Journal. Yesterday, I noticed this piece of news, and basically, as we sit here and try to negotiate with Iran and treat them as a reasonable nation, the journal says that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been in the hostage-taking business since its earliest days. We know that. So we shouldn't be surprised by the news that happened on Tuesday. Iranian warships seized a cargo ship and her crew of 34 in the Strait of Hormuz. This reminds us, says the journal, of the kind of regime the West is now seeking to strike a nuclear bargain with. And so they seized them. They have now, I think, released them. It's a Marshall Islands flagged container ship. It was transiting the strait along an internationally recognized maritime route when it was surrounded by gunships of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. They ordered the ship to divert into Iranian waters, fired warning shots when the skipper of this ship, the Tigris, refused to do so, sent out a distress call, the Tigris did. It was picked up by the USS Farragut. The Iranians then boarded the ship, steered her toward the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. We'll see how long this diversion lasts, says the journal, and what price Iran will demand for releasing the ship and the crew. So I guess they haven't done so. Of course, this incident comes less than a week after a convoy of Iranian cargo and warships destined for the Houthi allies, because Iran is hooking up with the Houthis in Yemen. They overthrew the president there, who was backed by the U.S., so there we're coming up against Iran again. So there was another incident that took place. The journal says perhaps that means the Iranians are merely trying to score political points by playing a game of payback. I don't know why they would do that now, but it's also a reminder, they say, that Iran has not moderated its rogue behavior during the current presidency of Hassan Rouhani, whose own alleged moderation is one of the Obama administration's justifications for seeking a nuclear deal. They say, well, Iran is now run by moderates. Right. The habit of seeking unarmed ships on the high seas or innocent foreign reporters working in Iran is barbarism, says the journal, and that's very true. What happens when Tehran decides to imprison pesky UN inspectors who are trying to verify Iran's nuclear promises? And the journal goes on to say Iran's disdain for basic maritime conventions is a good indicator of how it will treat any agreement it signs, which is why the Obama administration is deluding itself that it can draw a line between Iran's everyday behavior and its nuclear commitments. Pirates don't keep their word, says the journal, and it's dangerous to bargain as if they will. We'll talk more about Iran in the second hour with Clare Lopez from the Center for Security Policy. Well, since I said it was open line, I will take your calls before I get to Baltimore. I don't like talking about the rioting anyway. I don't like watching that, and I don't like seeing it, and I imagine most of you don't either. But we do need to talk about it. Andrea, though, is in North Carolina. Hi, Andrea. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you, Penna.
Is it Andrea or Andrea?
Either one's fine. Okay. I just am always glad to hear what you have to say. I really enjoy it. I feel like Josh McDowell said.
Oh,
I heard that. Okay,
he was being sweet.
Yes, and by the way, I was at Chapel Hill and Campus Crusade, so I'm part of that, exactly part of that. So I just thoroughly enjoyed that. Yes. But this is why I called. I listened so carefully to your wonderful commentary presentation of the oral arguments, 2.5 hours with the Supreme Court about same-sex marriage. It has got me and my husband very upset, and we just try to talk about it, but then we get so upset we can't talk about it anymore. And I'm sure a lot of Christians feel that way. But then it was so well presented, and the ray of hope, I just held on to that, and I do. And you said, we need to pray, and that's exactly what we need to do. Excuse me. Then the very next day, I won't say the announcer on NPR, spent an hour with it. And the thing that I was listening for, and I'm sure you would do the same, and you're probably aware of who I'm referring to, but the thing is, when it was presented for 1 hour in discussion, just like you had, there was not one hint or representative there that said anything at all about the convictions and faith of those that believe in traditional marriage. It was a slanted thing. Of course, all
Did
my
they
Christian...
talk about the motivations of those people then? What do they think their motivations are?
No, they didn't. They just they used the term you used, which I hadn't heard that in a long time. I think, did I say it right? Fait accompli?
Yeah.
They discussed it as it being already decided. Even with Kennedy's, comments and the fact that perhaps the justices are thinking seriously about the repercussions and consequences of what can happen if we put this into effect without the democratic process. Who knows what that means, right? Who knows what that means? It wasn't even discussed. And this is a person I respect a whole lot. I mean, I'm an intelligent woman. I'm a college grad. I just have a lot of respect. I'm like you. I have a very open mind. I have a searching heart. And I was very disappointed, but I was disappointed, and I wanted to share that because I just thought, and this person, I believe, is a Christian. And so it just bothered me, and it broke my heart, and I shed some tears. And then I said, well, God told me to stand anyway. And I know that 80%, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but 80% of pastors in this country, I know the Unitarian Church absolutely endorses a same-sex marriage. I know that some Methodists do, some Baptists do. I know some Catholics do. But it's a weird, but 80% still of America. And when this is the whole thing, they discussed it. 37 states have now passed this.
Because
but when it started out, Penna, it wasn't. It was 37 states for 4 or 38 or whatever for traditional marriage. Is that not correct?
I'm not sure. I think it turned around from being 31 states had marriage amendments to their constitutions, and others just had laws.
1996, right? 1996.
But it turned around very quickly because the courts, after that last Supreme Court decision, the gay groups went after the states. So the states, their laws protecting marriage fell one after another. That's why there's 37 states now with same-sex marriage. But I want to ask you, because we only have a couple seconds.
I know.
But did you tell me, did you just say that they're on NPR, they think that they already know how the Supreme Court's going to rule?
There was no voice there.
Okay.
There was no voice there for traditional marriage. Literally no voice. I mean, I was listening. There was no voice. It was all as if it's already been decided, and that's sort of what, you were feeling. I could hear it in your voice. You were feeling that.
I was feeling that, but I was a little bit encouraged by the justices.
Yes. I'm very encouraged by what I heard from your discussion. But
okay.
I'm just discouraged by. But
hey,
then
Andrea,
again,
I have to say goodbye. It's a break, but thank you for calling in. We'll be right back.
Maybe you've noticed, but Christians find many things to disagree about. But one thing that all true Christians do is pray. Point of View Radio has a plan to help you join with your family from sea to shining sea and pray for America. It starts by getting our new booklet, Pray for America, and we'll also send you occasional reminders and updates on special needs to pray for. One need that we know about is to pray for the Supreme Court. Over the next few months, they're considering the definition of marriage and whether or not to force every state to accept the fiction of so-called same-sex marriage. When the foundation of your house is compromised, the entire structure is in danger, and this decision may seriously undermine our culture's foundation and fuel a growing attack on religious freedom. Please visit our website. Look for the Pray for America picture on the right side of our homepage. You may have to scroll down just a bit. pointofview.net. Join people all across the land and pray for America. Visit right now, pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
Well, let me put another item on the table very quickly. Today's Wall Street Journal had an editorial and entitled "The Blue City Model: Baltimore Shows How Progressivism Has Failed Urban America." And they said what went up in flames in Baltimore Monday night was not merely a senior center, small businesses, and police cars burning down, was the Blue City model of urban governance. And, you know, there's this victim mentality that's taking place. And, of course, you know the story. Freddie Gray, 25 years old, died of spinal cord injuries in a police van, and he was picked up for having some sort of a weapon. They don't know really what happened with his death. They've even said now that they could hear lots of bumping against the walls in the police van going on, and he was in there alone. So they don't really know why he had these spinal cord injuries. That's all being investigated, and we'll know. But meanwhile, there's rioting, there's destruction, there's flames, and anarchy in Baltimore, horrible anarchy. And so when you look at it, and there are other cities that are like this, and this is what the Wall Street Journal is calling the Blue City mentality. This type of thing that's been going on is the fruit of liberalism, of progressivism. These people are not victims in the sense that they're not victims of the police. It's more a product of sin, and everything has been downgraded. And they give these dysfunctions. They've list three major ones in the journal. The main failures: high crime, low economic growth, and failing public schools. That serve primarily as jobs programs. Well, President Obama says one of the answers to this is jobs programs, but problem is there aren't that many jobs. The unemployment rate in Baltimore is 8.4% compared to 5.4% in the state of Maryland. And another interesting part about this was, and I think the answer really is we need to bring redemption to these areas. But Gary Bauer mentioned here they were at the Supreme Court on Tuesday debating the destruction of marriage, where people are rioting in the streets who are youth, many fatherless youth, already really living a life that is a result of the destruction of marriage that's happened in other ways in this country. So some of our answers have been wrong. I hope that we can get our act together with regard to the cities. The Journal talks about some of the progress that was made in big cities in the 80s, for instance, in New York under Rudy Giuliani and Michael Bloomberg. But the progressives have been making a comeback in some of these big cities, for instance, Rahm Emanuel in Chicago, and Bill de Blasio now just going back on some of the policies that have helped New York. So what we need is renewal, and we need private economic development, personal responsibility, sort of broken windows type policing, and educational choice are some of the policies, but also just Christians. There are some answers that Christians can bring to these places, and we need to be about that. Well, let's take some more calls here. We're having an open line this segment. Brian is in the state of Texas. Hi, Brian. Thanks for calling in.
How are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
Good. I was actually calling about the Corcoran-Menendez bill you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
And everything you said about it sounded horrible, but there was one thing I had heard somewhere else that you didn't mention. I just hadn't had a chance to Google it to confirm it.
It's not that it's horrible, it's just weaker than it was. It was weakened. Hello? I'm losing you. Brian, I'm going to go to another call, and if you can get into a spot where we can hear you, we'll take it in just a couple of minutes. So keep on driving. Let's go to now Tom in Texas on KBJS. Hi, Tom. Thanks for calling in.
Hi. Thank you. Couple things. One, are the Marshall? Do we have any treaties with the Marshall Islands?
Do we have any? I don't know.
I'm just curious because I mean there have been so many acts of war perpetrated by Iran, as in the hostages they're holding, et cetera,
Sure.
et cetera. And maybe the definition of act of war has changed.
I don't know. I thought you were going to talk about marriage.
Well, that too. Okay, I have. There's something, and I don't know. Maybe this is not as important as I think it is. I was a broadcast major in college, and I'm curious as to whether or not all media, including Christian media, are helping legitimize this issue because they keep saying marriage, gay marriage. As far as I'm concerned, it's not marriage. You can call it a civil union or a partnership or anything else, but it's not marriage. Marriage is a man and a woman. And as biblically defined and as defined by our forefathers, and I'm wondering if you think that adds any legitimacy to this.
You know, it's interesting to have watched the progression of this, because a lot of people that I respect that are in this movement, at the beginning, say 10 years ago, there was an absolute refusal to call it marriage. They would call it something like counterfeit marriage. That would be a term that would be used, or so-called same-sex marriage. Or they'd put it in quotes, like some of the rules for writing for some of these pro-family groups were, they required every piece of information, every fundraising letter, everything that went out to have the quotes around marriage when you talked about it as they were fighting it. And it has kind of fallen away in a sense, and people are just using the words. I find myself doing it, and I think I do it out of laziness sometimes, and because it is just familiarity, and that's what's happening. I don't know, Tom. I don't know. I mean, I think they're doing enough damage all by themselves without worrying about how we say it. In the courts, I think the courts' actions have been, and these judges, their actions have been the most damaging because they brought it against the will of the people. But if we could, all get together and say it right, it might be good. I don't know if that's going to happen anymore, though. I get in trouble for saying gay too, but I say it.
I know. Well, I'm not very politically correct, so I don't worry about that part too much. But the other thing is too, how many of the states where federal judges have come in and overruled the will of the people, how many of those states have appealed this through the appeals process to higher court?
Well, that's exactly what's happening here, in a sense. I mean, the case that the Supreme Court took was a good case. It was the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, where the Sixth Circuit upheld the marriage laws in 4 states. So that's the case that went to the Supreme Court. But that was a circuit split, because the other circuit courts, most of the other circuits in the country, actually struck down gay marriage laws. So that's what they are considering now. It's up in the highest court. This is it, folks. This is really where the rubber meets the road. And I was encouraged in a tiny sense because the court took the case that was a positive, the Sixth Circuit case. That was good. Right. Some lawyers said that was good. Others didn't think that mattered. And then, a lot of the folks in the pro-family movement across the country were very pessimistic about the outcome of this case. Now, the oral arguments have some people, because they heard some reasonable comments from the justices and even liberals like Stephen Breyer, who indicated that, yes, they're taking this seriously. They know this is a momentous decision. And so, some people are thinking, well, perhaps it will not go the way we think. Now, they could kind of, what they could do, because there are 2 cases. One case is the marriage laws of the states upholding one man, one woman marriage. Are those constitutional? The other case is, do states have to recognize same-sex marriages from other states? Now, those of us who hated that idea for a long time, and certainly the Defense of Marriage Act protected from that, that's been struck down. So now a lot of those folks who are in that movement, the pro-marriage, traditional marriage movement, are saying, well, I guess that would be, a compromise that we could live with. So that may be what happens. Who knows?
We need a way to recall activist judges who want to make law instead of and just interpreting it.
Yeah, there's so many of them out there.
I know, but I know it would be extremely difficult to go through. It'd have to come from the Congress, I guess, especially when you're talking about federal judges.
Yeah, it would. I don't know. It would be a massive, massive undertaking. So, but anyway, Tom, thank you for calling in, weighing in on not only Iran, but also marriage. And we appreciate your call.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I guess our open line now is officially ending, although we will take your calls throughout the program on the various issues that we are discussing. We will be delving into women in combat later in the program. Should we be opening up the military now to combat positions for women? I mean, women serve well throughout the military, but this is something different. And another sort of case of social engineering, in my opinion. Elaine Donnelly will join us later. We're going to talk more about this deal with Iran and some things you may not know about it. But next up, I'm going to be joined by Father David Roseberry from Christ Church, an Anglican church in Plano, Texas. And just to get some encouragement, I think a lot of you, even from the calls we've had today, need it. I know I need it. So we'll talk about the Good Shepherd. That's right after this here on Point of View. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and ladies and gentlemen, I, just like many of you, have this growing concern for the direction of our country and our culture. And in the last 6 months, that concern, really a deep concern, has been growing in me because of escalating events, things we talk about every day here on Point of View. And it's gnawing at me sometimes. It becomes worry. And certainly there's prayer, and I do pray for the country as you do, and as we are encouraging you to do even more now during our Pray for America campaign. I dedicate my entire prayer time every Wednesday morning to the nation and to the leaders. But in God's grace, sometimes he allows me to hear a message in person from a pastor that sort of puts things in perspective for me. and calms my heart. And it's not that such a pastor would say, well, things are going to be better, the country will be fine. It's not that. But the latest, it's more God saying, I'm with you. And this happened to me this last Sunday. I was blessed to hear one of these messages, and the pastor who delivered it was gracious to agree to come on the radio with me to talk about this message. And I'd like to introduce him now. He is David Roseberry, an ordained priest and founding rector and senior pastor of Christ Church in Plano, Texas. He planted this church. I believe it's he that planted it in 1985. It's an Anglican congregation, and it's a member of the Anglican Church in North America. And I'm so grateful. I'll just say this now that I also had the opportunity. You probably know that I took a trip to Israel last fall, and David Roseberry and his wife were the leaders of that trip. So it was fun to see him in that light, but it was just great to hear this sermon. I want to talk about it. David, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Great to be here with you, Penna.
Well, it's so good to have you. And of course, we were talking and we were hearing this message coming out of John 10 about the Good Shepherd and, the fact that we're like sheep. And that's not necessarily a compliment to men and women, is it?
Right. That was the idea that I came to, is that I think the Bible gives us this picture of sheep, and we've romanticized it over, so many years of hearing it. But this time, we think of them as soft and fluffy and kind of cute, but this time I began to see that, it is not a compliment. They're kind of dumb, kind of defenseless. In many ways, when God calls us sheep in the Scripture, He's really putting us in relationship to Him as the shepherd, and it's not as we can't be very proud of being sheep.
Yeah, we shouldn't be. And we're in a sense, we're lost right now. We're lost sheep, and we've had this good shepherd, but in a sense, the whole culture is turning away from that whole idea, and that leaves us unmoored, doesn't it?
It really does, and I think when we use the idea of the people are the sheep, again, as I was saying, we get the one idea that it's soft and fluffy, but the reality is that it does mean that we tend to get lost. We tend to go over cliffs. Sheep are pretty high maintenance. In Scripture, as Jesus tells us, they do get lost. Remember what He says, that He had compassion on the crowds because they were like sheep without a shepherd. That's a heart that Christ has for His people in a culture like ours or in any culture.
Well, that's so encouraging to me to know that He has that heart for us because, as you mentioned, our culture, we're so arrogant now. We, in a sense, the controlling powers that be, the elites in the culture, they believe that they know truth and they have truth. And there's this sense of arrogance out there that pulls us away, and the church has to figure out how to be in that culture. There's no longer a Christian consensus, is there?
Right. And I think one of the realities is that, at least as my take on it, Penna, is this, that I want to represent Christ in the culture that we live in, not the culture that we wish we lived in, but the culture that we live in. And I kind of push back on the idea of culture war, because I really don't want to fight for the American culture so much as I want to fight for the worldview that gave rise to the American culture and many other cultures around the world. And I think this is where this idea of lost sheep and the Good Shepherd can help us. We have to look at our neighbors who, like us as sheep, are lost, that we need to find His voice, we need to follow Him. And this is something that, the Lord would be the Good Shepherd, not just to the American culture, but to all people in every culture.
One of the things that, I think we believers, we have to trust God. We need to follow. I forget this. I want to do everything myself. I want to fight I like fighting the culture wars. I'm one of those, but really you can't win it. Number one, you can't win it on your own. And number two, that's not the point. The point is to look to the Good Shepherd, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the point, is that if you ever were to win the culture war, what have you won? You've won the culture. But really, I think the Lord calls us into a much bigger arena, a much bigger battle. I mean, what I said on Sunday was that everybody in the sound of my voice, and I was speaking to hundreds of people at Christ Church in Plano, every one of us will be called upon to not necessarily take a stand, although that will happen, but really to declare a love, to declare a loyalty to the Good Shepherd. And I think that is true in every circumstance, in all times, and all seasons, and especially now. We ought to be giving thanks to God for the culture that we live in, because we have an opportunity to stand and declare love and loyalty to our Lord Jesus, who is our Good Shepherd.
You know, you're a pastor, and the Good Shepherd that we're speaking about in this passage of Scripture is Christ, but pastors are shepherds also.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the shepherd with the flock of sheep would, sense the dangers and see the dangers. Mm-hmm. And I think we have all kinds of pastors in this country. We have pastors that are over the top, warning people. And, I don't think I'd want to be in that church, because it would be too much of the things that that concern me. I want to be reminded of how much God loves me. But also, I think a pastor does tell the sheep where the dangers are, but he's also their protection. I mean, right. You talked about what the pastors did with the pens of the sheep when they would go in. Tell us about that.
Well, the idea is that Jesus employs this amazing image of a pen, an enclosure where the sheep would go and they would stay overnight. And it was opened essentially closed on all four sides except one little opening. And he would literally, the shepherd would lay down his life in that opening and protect the sheep. And if necessary, sacrifice his life to protect the sheep against any kind of wolf or any encroacher that would come to snatch or to kill or to steal or to destroy the sheep. And Jesus says, you are my sheep. You stay in here with me. And when we go out together. And the Lord will lead us, not necessarily drive us, but he will lead us into into our future. We have safety with him. And you mentioned something about pastors,
yeah, I've got about 30 seconds before the break.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Well, I want to say, I do feel like a pastor. Oftentimes, Penna, I feel like a sheepdog, just barking and yapping and trying to, click at the heels of people and trying to encourage them in a particular way.
Well, thank you for doing that for us. And, you've painted a picture of our great shepherd. We need to lean into him, ladies and gentlemen. Pastor David Roseberry of Christ Church of Plano, thank you for being with me today. It's been a blessing.
Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us over the break. You'll hear about our Pray for America campaign, and then we'll be back with lots more after this break.
The future of marriage in America is now in the balance, as is potentially the future of anyone with a business and a conscience. 2.5 hours, all the time given Tuesday, to discuss the fate of something that's been around since the beginning. One man, one woman, one flesh, symbolizing God's relationship with those who are his. In Proverbs 21, we find this: the king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. I think it's safe to say that the heart of Anthony Kennedy is in the hand of the Lord. God can turn it wherever he will, because following Tuesday's session, virtually every commentator was convinced that Kennedy holds the deciding vote on whether marriage will be redefined and a new view forced upon the nation and everyone in it. Please pray for the Supreme Court and join us as we pray for America. pointofview.net/pray. Sign up. We'll send you our free Pray for America booklet, a wrist reminder, and occasional prayer updates. We need to pray. pointofview.net/pray. pointofview.net/pray. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily, and love you guys, and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to the second hour of Point of View. As I was speaking with Father David Roseberry in the last segment, one of the statements he made about having to live in the culture that we're in, not the culture that we wish we were in. And certainly a lot of us, with everything in us, we try to fight for what we know is right in the society and the culture. And then sometimes things change and, we lose the battle sometimes and things really change. That's what's going to happen, I think, over this decision over marriage. But in the military, we've really watched that. We've for many years, I've been talking to my next guest on Point of View about different trends in the military, things that are happening, policies. And some things have changed there, and there are other things, though, that haven't changed yet but might, and that's what we're going to talk about. My guest is Elaine Donnelly. She is president of the Center for Military Readiness. That is an independent, nonpartisan public policy organization, and they specialize in military social issues. It's been around since 1993, and CMR advocates high single standards in all forms of military training and sound priorities in the making of military social policies. Oh, my goodness. Elaine, we've talked about so many things over the years, but now It's women in combat. And can we affect this policy?
Well, Penna, it's always good to talk with you. And this issue really got my attention many years ago. And when I was a member of the Presidential Commission that looked at this issue thoroughly in 1992, really no one would have believed that we would be where we are now. With members of Congress apparently going along with the idea of women in the combat arms, which, first of all, we need to define. Combat arms means to attack the enemy. Women have been in harm's way. They have served with courage. This is not in question. They have been in harm's way. That means subject to incident-related combat or something unexpected, something that comes to them that puts them in danger. But they are not required to attack the enemy. That's the job of the infantry, special operations forces, armor, artillery, and the like. These are the tiny minority of positions that are not open to women, at least not yet. But the administration wants to order women into those units, and I stress order. This is not a voluntary situation once you join the military. And they're doing so, even though all of the study and research that has been done so far indicates, first of all, this is not a good idea, and secondly, there is not anything that has been shown so far that makes the case for gender integrating the combat arms. And we also know women don't want this. We know it would be harmful to women. Injury rates would skyrocket. This has been documented several times now, and a recent report out of Britain makes it very, very clear that not only would injury rates accelerate to unacceptable degrees if women were forced to carry heavy loads into combat. We know that it would also affect marksmanship, the ability to attack the enemy. Fatigue is a factor. Fatigue sets in earlier with women than it does men. It's a matter of biology. It's reality. This is all fact-based information. To ignore all this information makes you wonder, why would Congress condone policies that we know are going to increase the number of disabled women veterans in this country and that will have negative effects on our combat readiness? It makes no sense other than, politics, fear of aggressive feminists, but there's no excuse.
So is that the only people that are really calling for this that you can discern is the aggressive feminists?
Primarily, and many of them are either in the Pentagon or recent veterans, but when I say many, they're still a tiny minority, because the Army did a survey recently and found that of the Army women that they surveyed, this is an official survey, thousands of women, 92.5% said they wanted nothing to do with these combat assignments. So it's a small minority, but very vocal. And they seem to have got, well, of course, they've gotten the administration to adopt their position that there should be no exceptions, not even for the infantry, not even for Navy SEALs. It's a terrible idea.
So you'd have female Navy SEALs?
Pardon?
They're actually pushing for female naval SEALs and Special Operations Forces?
Absolutely. Special Operations Forces, including the Navy SEALs, Delta Force, the Rangers, across the board. Now, it matters not that all of the human issues that come into play that we know already exist in units other than the combat arms, to extend all of those complications into the combat arms. And in a situation where, I don't know how much you know about Navy SEALs and Rangers, how they train, how they deploy. They don't carry comfort items, things like blankets. They don't do that. To maintain body warmth, they do things that most people would not do. But it's there for a reason, because body warmth means skin to skin. And if you introduce into that kind of an element sexuality in a way that is inappropriate, what you do is break down the unity, the strength, the training that makes our Special Operations Forces the best in the world. That's why they are respected. It's only one element of their training. There's so many other things. The strength factors in the extreme combat arms, the special forces, the elite forces, the strength demands are huge, and they are constant. What you do is you go out and you fight, and you don't have any time to recover. You don't have any time to rest. Then you're on a continuous mission, or you have to go off on another mission. Recently, the British Ministry of Defense, the United Kingdom, put out a report, and they had a very vivid description of what combat is all about. And I'll just read a couple of passages. The nature of combat is immutable. A ground-close combat will remain an intense, visual, and unavoidably physical activity involving violent death, injury, all-pervading concussive noise, horror, fear, blood, high levels of emotion. Combat exposes inadequacies and applies manifold stresses that are likely to occur repeatedly throughout the combat operations and require high levels of both mental and physical endurance. Endurance matters. Endurance is the reason why, even though 29 very spirited and admirable young women, Marine officers, tried to succeed on the infantry officer course at Quantico, Virginia, none of them succeeded. The reason is endurance matters. They couldn't.
So that doesn't do anything to the decision makers or the powers that be to see that was a test. None of them succeeded.
It was a test, and the test did not go the way some people expected it to go. They only got that many volunteers. They were hoping to have 100 or more. Mm-hmm. Women don't want to do this kind of thing. It's very demanding. We're fortunate that apparently there weren't any injuries, but the female frame is such that injuries do occur more frequently, and debilitating injuries can last a lifetime.
Wow, this is just disgusting. Elaine Donnelly is my guest. I've got to jump in, Elaine, because we've got a break. But we're going to continue to I want to move on to the Dempsey Rule, because to me this is disturbing. I have put 2 articles up on the website at pointofview.net. There's one from Breitbart that Elaine recommended, and it basically summarizes this situation. And then the other article will tell us about the Dempsey Rule. And then Dempsey is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and this is part of his agenda. And ladies and gentlemen, you need to know this. This is Army General Martin Dempsey. He's pushing this stuff, and Elaine Donnelly will tell us more right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kirby Anderson.
If a celebrity couple separates, should the couple's frozen embryos be destroyed or put up for adoption? This is a question surrounding the actress Sofia Vergara. She is best known for her role in the TV program Modern Family or for her furniture commercials. She is now in the spotlight over a bioethics issue. She and her ex, Nick Loeb, have 2 frozen embryos that were created when they were still in a relationship. They aren't in a relationship now, so Nick Loeb brought a lawsuit against Sofia Vergara because he doesn't want the embryos destroyed. But she doesn't want the frozen embryos implanted in her. Some of this might be a publicity stunt since there's no evidence that Sofia Vergara wants to destroy the embryos. Her lawyer said she never suggested she wanted to have the embryos destroyed. And there is a section in the contract that states that unless otherwise directed by both of us in writing, in person, or by notarized letter, the center shall continue to store the cryopreserved material for an indefinite period of time. This celebrity spat illustrates a larger issue. She does not want the baby, and he, and perhaps she, doesn't want the embryos destroyed. We need King Solomon to help resolve this moral impasse. Of course, I've already mentioned one possibility, embryo adoption. An infertile couple could adopt these frozen embryos and begin the adoption journey 9 months earlier with pregnancy and childbirth. This may be the only pro-life solution to this moral dilemma. We aren't talking about frozen sperm or eggs that have 23 chromosomes. We're talking about frozen embryos that have 46 chromosomes. Everything a human being needs genetically is already present in these frozen embryos. If you don't like the moral dilemma and the ethical circumstances surrounding these frozen embryos, you're not alone. That is why we need to think through the implications before we create embryos in the laboratory and then freeze them for future use. These frozen embryos are currently in legal and medical limbo. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you go to pointofview.net, you'll see this article. It's from the Washington Times by Rowan Scarborough, and it starts out 2 years ago. Army General Martin E. Dempsey, the nation's top military officer, laid down an edict on the Obama administration's plan to open direct land combat jobs to women. If women cannot meet a standard, senior commanders better have a good reason why it should not be lowered. Elaine Donnelly from Center for Military Readiness is my guest. Elaine, so does this mean they're going to dumb down standards or throw them out if women can't meet them, if they can't figure out a good reason why they should keep it?
Well, we're talking about an incremental process. Something would not happen overnight, but it definitely would happen in a very short amount of time.
Are they working on it now?
They certainly are, and here's why. The administration's mandate is no exceptions. The administration wants women in all positions that are currently all male, but there is a loophole. There is the option for the service secretaries to ask for exceptions. Now, let's suppose they don't, or let's suppose they're overwhelmed with pressure to do it the president's way. The problem is the counter pressure for diversity, gender diversity metrics. That's another name for quotas in the combat arms. Now, in January 2013, the Joint Chiefs Chairman, Martin Dempsey, the general, called for a critical mass or a significant cohort of women in the combat arms. In other words, not just one or two, but a significant cohort. That could be anywhere 10, 15%, whatever. And he suggested that high standards beyond female capabilities would be questioned. Now, we call this the Dempsey Rule. I'm sure he doesn't call it that, but we call it the Dempsey Rule. And the phrase is starting to catch on because it's very clear to understand. It means this: if the standard is too hard for women, it's probably too hard. Now, if that question is asked, and it's determined that that particular standard, whether it's carrying logs in Navy SEAL training or doing the combat endurance test at the infantry officer course, if it's too hard for women, then it's probably too hard. Eventually, the tough standards will be revalidated. Watch that word validate. Validate does not mean validate high. It can mean validate low, lower but equal standards. That's what gender neutral means. Now, when you see that word gender neutral, you can remember what I'm saying here. Gender neutral can be lower than it was before, equal but lower than before. This is how the Dempsey rule would work in actual practice. But it won't be announced. It would just happen very quietly. Certain hard standards or tasks that they have to do would just be dropped or redefined or gender normed, something like that. A survey was done among 9,000 Special Operations Forces command personnel. These are all men. In a recent RAND survey. And they said two things. They think that their standards in their community is too high for women to achieve. And secondly, they expect their own leaders to capitulate to political pressure, allowing erosion of training standards. That's a quote from the survey. Now, if that many Special Operations Forces command people see that, they have good reason to worry about that, because obviously the standards that they must meet are way beyond the capabilities of women. They're way beyond the capabilities of usually 60% of the people who try out.
These are the cream of the cream.
Yes, that's what BUDS training is all about. There were 2 Navy SEAL trainees who died just the other day, one of them from my hometown, Livonia. They were in a water situation, holding breath, 2 of them together. They both died. We don't know all the circumstances, but Navy SEAL training is so tough that sometimes people cannot make it through and sometimes they don't make it through. Casualties do occur in training. And it has to be that way, because when our Navy SEALs are on deployment, they're doing everything the ground Delta Force is doing. They do it underwater. They do it under very difficult conditions. This is why we honor and respect all of the men who are part of that community. There are women who are part of the Navy SEAL community, but they are not on deployment as the troops that attack the enemy. They do support roles that are very important. But to pretend that sexuality doesn't matter, that physical differences don't matter, that unit cohesion does not matter, this runs contrary to common sense. And it is not a pro-women position. Now, Congress is long overdue. They haven't paid any attention to this issue in many years. They haven't had hearings in the House in more than 35 years. Can you believe that? 35 years. On the Senate side, about 22 years. They haven't had a hearing on this issue. Now,
is anything happening now? I mean, we've got a little different composition of Congress, and with this Dempsey rule out there, you'd think they'd do something.
I'll tell you. Just last night, there was a vote on the National Defense Authorization Act in the House Armed Services Committee. This draft that they voted on will go for a full floor vote in a week or two. The move was made by Loretta Sanchez to eliminate the notification requirement that said you have to have 30 legislative days before you can open up, say, the infantry, make a change in women's status. She attacked that notification requirement, and she got a compromise measure through, reducing 30 legislative days, which means continuous congressional session, to 30 calendar days. Now, if Congress isn't going to pay...
So they're going the wrong way.
Of course, what Congress should have done was not only strengthen that notification law, they should have codified everything in place saying, you will not change anything regarding women until we, Congress, have the opportunity to review all of the research that's taken place since 2012. That's what they should have done. But instead, Loretta Sanchez made this move, and because she can be very intimidating, scary to men who don't want to deal with her, she managed to get this measure through. She wanted more, of course. It could have been worse. But that's no excuse for doing something or taking a big step in the wrong direction. This was a small step in the wrong direction. It's still a small step.
Yeah, and it's the wrong direction.
They shouldn't have taken it.
Elaine, excuse me, I want to ask you a quick question, just a little bit shifting, because at the beginning I talked about how some things have changed, and We can't, we've just got to live in that atmosphere. And one thing that changed that you fought was the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So now we've got open homosexual practice in the military. We've got all these attacks on religious liberty. We talk about it all the time because Kelly Shackelford from Liberty Institute is one of our co-hosts many days. So we have that. And, you know, just now they're coming back and dealing with sexual assault in the military.
Right.
And that men are experiencing thousands more sexual assaults. Duh. Are we not surprised?
Well, that's right. The rate of actual cases, okay, that you've got two sets of numbers when they come out with their annual report, and we report all of them. You've got the virtual numbers and the actual numbers. The cases, actual cases, keep creeping up. They were 10% men before. Then they went up to 12, now 14. And one of the estimates, or actual cases rather, had the level at pushing 17%. Now, the trend line is all wrong. And the virtual cases, the reports, survey reports of unwanted sexual conduct, those numbers are also increasing. And there are, according to that second set of numbers, more men reporting this than women because there are more men in the military. The percentage among women is higher. So the trend lines are all wrong. Every prediction made by people on my side of that issue, it's all playing out pretty much as we predicted. It's taking a couple of years. We haven't seen all of the effects yet. Religious liberty is a huge issue. Marriage, the promises made about marriage were denied or broken within months of repeal of the law regarding gays in the military. Now the next step is upon us. Transgenders in the military, that's the next step under LGBT law, which is what we have now, LGBT law, replacing the previous 1993 law stating that gays and lesbians were not eligible to be in the armed forces at all. So this is the consequence of electing this president, but also the Congress, which has been pretty much marginalized and pushed aside and ignored. They're allowing all this to happen, and repealing that law was definitely a huge step in the wrong direction.
It was. Elaine, you're there in this battle. Don't leave. There've been a lot that's been done because of you that's been positive. We're just telling people the bad news right now. But thank you so much for being a voice of reason for the military and for joining me today.
Well, you're very welcome, and our military is in peril, but the battle's not over yet. So people should be in touch with their members of Congress. Go to our webpage. I think you've got it posted there.
We do.
They'll find in-depth articles, and I do mean detailed, that back up everything that I've said, but so much more. Congress needs to take a look at this fact-based evidence of problems in our military, and they need to find a way to get them back on the right track.
Elaine Donnelly, thank you very much for joining me.
You're welcome.
All right, the Secretary of Defense said that, you know, when men and women begin working together more and getting used to it, sexual assault will go down. Do you think so? We'll be right back. We're going to talk about Iran after this.
Are you ever frustrated with America's leaders? I know. Are you ever not frustrated? So, what are you doing about it? In Proverbs chapter 21, the Spirit of God hits us with this: the king's heart, and we could say the president's heart, the senator's heart, the congressman's heart, the Supreme Court justice's heart, is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he wishes. Your prayers unleash the most powerful weapon in the universe. If you're in union with Jesus Christ, your prayers touch God's heart. So again, what are you doing about your frustrations with government? Point of View Radio is spearheading a new effort to get as many as possible to pray for America. It starts when you visit our website, pointofview.net, and click on the Pray for America picture on the right side of the page. We'll send you our Pray for America booklet and updates on things to pray for. We must pray. Click in now to pointofview.net and pray for America. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
Well, folks, since we were just talking about women in the military and this push for women in combat positions, you'll be interested to know that our next guest, Clare Lopez, completed Marine Corps Officer Candidate School in Quantico, Virginia. She declined a military commission to join the CIA. She is an international relations expert, now is the Vice President for Research and Analysis at the Center for Security Policy, and also a senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research and a member of the Board of Advisors for Canadian Mackenzie Institute. She's very well versed in foreign policy, especially, well, one of her areas of expertise is Iran, and that's why I've asked you to join me, Clare. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me. Glad to be with you.
Well, we've posted your two articles, How the Iran Lobby Sidetracked the Nuclear Talks. And, you know, a lot of us are scratching our heads about these talks and our government actually just shifting totally and completely 180 in the way it's dealing with Iran. But there's an actual Iran lobby.
Yeah, that's a term actually that I first saw myself some 7 or 8 years ago in the Iranian media itself, where they actually transliterated the English language words, Iran lobby, into Farsi, and talked about this lobby group, which is a network of people, groups, NGOs, think tanks in the United States that help support the Tehran regime's agenda among policymaking circles here, especially in Washington, D.C.
Well, in a sense, that starts to explain some things. You say, though, that as we're talking about their weapons program and we're trying to control it in certain ways and put some tabs on it, there's a secret program that this agreement will not affect.
Well, exactly. I mean, the Iranian nuclear weapons program that we're talking about right now began in 1988 under the Ayatollah Khomeini before he died. And it proceeded in secret, clandestinely, for the next about 14 years, when the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, UN monitoring agency for nuclear programs, did not know anything about it. Apparently, neither did the public. And until 2002, when an Iranian opposition group, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, whose leader, by the way, President-elect Maryam Rajavi, addressed U.S. Congress in testimony yesterday for the first time. But until they blew the lid off the program and publicly disclosed the various weapons sites that we now have and know about. But what I'm getting at is that even though Iran is a signatory to the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, it has never in the history of the regime abided by that agreement, which compels it to disclose all of its nuclear facilities, open them to IAEA inspection, and generally comply with the regulations of the treaty, the obligations of a treaty signatory. And so they've always had a clandestine program, and even after certain of their theretofore clandestine sites were revealed in 2002, they quickly moved the program elsewhere, began to hide things in bunkers, especially underground and under mountains and tunnels and so forth, and to this day keep a good part of their nuclear weapons program out of the public eye. The places that were revealed were simply turned into show places. The IAEA invited in to do the inspections, but the real program, of course, moved elsewhere. So bottom line, what I'm saying here is that Iran has never not had a clandestine nuclear weapons program since 1988.
So Clare, Clare Lopez is my guest. Clare, so there are these show sites, and then there are the clandestine sites. So when they are negotiating in Lausanne and John Kerry's making this deal, it's not even, in a sense, there's no chance that the inspectors will get to the clandestine sites. That's not even...
No, and even some sites that now have, subsequently to 2002, been revealed. Like, I mean, take, for instance, Fardo, which is sometimes called Qom, and it's near that Theological Seminary City, which takes its name out, or the site takes its name after the city. That is a site that became public in 2009, and it is a centrifuge site located underground, under a mountain in this case, and supposedly has something like 3,000 centrifuges spinning away down there. And there's been a great deal of discussion about it in these recent talks, Geneva, Vienna, Lausanne. But if you look carefully at anybody's version of the more recent framework agreement, look at the U.S. version, look at the Iranian version, nowhere in any of these does it say that inspectors will be allowed into Fardo. And there are other sites that the opposition, or National Council of Resistance of Iran, has revealed more recently. Take a site called Lavizan 3, where, again, centrifuges and enrichment activity is taking place. Not even up for discussion, not even on the table to be discussed. So it really is quite a farce, the talks themselves, and anything that comes out of the talks will be nothing but a kabuki dance, a game.
So what about the Congress? You said that there was testimony just yesterday on this, and so the Congress is getting some of this information, but we were disappointed in their law, the Menendez-Corker law. We're disappointed. It's actually backtracked in its severity and its strength. So will the Congress do anything?
Well, the amendments continue to be offered this week as we go through. As I understand it, today, tomorrow, there's still discussion about a bill, whatever that may be, what its final form may be. But Congress is basically looking to play a role, as it should, in any ultimate agreement that may come out of these talks. I'm not convinced, by the way, that there will be an agreement, but let's say that there is. Congress definitely wants and rightly should have a role in reviewing and providing advice and consent on that agreement. So I'm hopeful that there will still be some kind of a bill passed. It's difficult to say at this point what form it will take because so many amendments have come up for discussion and a number have been voted down. For instance, one voted down was to designate the agreement as a formal treaty, which then, of course, requires by law a two-thirds vote of the Senate. That was voted down. Also voted down was an amendment that would have demanded the Iranians recognize the Jewish state of Israel's right to exist. That was voted down. So not sure what the final form will take, but the bottom line here is that Congress is really demanding a role, as it should, in whatever the negotiations conclude with some kind of an agreement.
But even better than that might be no agreement on the international level. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I have to say that because the truth is that any kind of an agreement is simply going to be a superficial, inadequate, and useless exercise, given, as we've talked about already here, that the real program is underground and elsewhere and behind what Iran calls military sites that will not, according to the Supreme Leader and other leadership figures in Iran, will not be open. No military sites will be ever opened or allowed for inspection. So without that, what are we talking about?
So better to keep a sanctions regime and keep that leverage on Iran and try to do it that way?
Well, I'm not even very convinced about sanctions. I mean, if you look at the history of the most severe sanctions that really began to bite on the Iranian economy from about late 2011 on through till last year, 2013, and then you compare the time frame with the quarterly reports that come out of the IAEA about the Iranian nuclear program. And it's very clear that as the sanctions grew harsher, the program accelerated.
Really?
It accelerated, yes. It accelerated in terms of numbers of centrifuges doing enrichment. It accelerated in the modernity, the upgrade, or the generation of centrifuge being brought into line online. It accelerated in terms of how much uranium was being enriched. It accelerated in terms of the percentage to which that uranium was being enriched. Honestly, I'm not quite sure what sanctions did except accelerate their program.
Well, Claire, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. I tend to agree with you. I get really nervous when we make these agreements with countries that were our enemies. But thank you so much for joining us and for the good work that you do.
Well, thanks for having me. Thank you.
That's Clare Lopez from Center for Security Policy. Next segment, we'll take your calls, 800-351-1212.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
It's a little bit ironic. I'm kind of laughing. I think Clare Lopez rocks. And, you know, the way the program mixes up together some days when we do multi-topics, I just thought it was kind of funny that we had Elaine Donnelly on talking about women in combat and how, you know, the people that want women in combat positions in the U.S. are very, very few. And most of us have a little bit of common sense. We realize that's just not a good way to go for so many reasons. But the ones that do, the feminists, I mean, they want it because they believe they need this for their resumes so that they can get the top positions. They can become a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff or whatever. And so it's a career path thing for them, and they're going to put other women in combat so they can have these top high positions. And you know, you look at a tough woman. I mean, I'm sure I heard a baby in the background in my interview with Claire. So she's probably doing the interview with her child at home on the phone. A lot of work from home arrangements going on in Washington, D.C. And she was in the CIA, and she's a military expert. She's an expert on Iran and terrorism and the EMP threat and all kinds of things like that. Here's a person making a difference in the culture, raising her child and doing it all so well. And so, I don't know, it just kind of made me think about how we conservatives are seen as so backwards and sometimes holding women back. We don't, ladies and gentlemen. We've got some great, strong, talented women in our ranks. So thank you, Claire. And we are taking your calls, 800-351-1212. Let's go to Tony in Georgia. Hi, Tony. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking my call. Well, like I said, over the past almost 20 minutes to half an hour as I listened to that.
Thank you for waiting all that time.
It's quite all right. I mean, because like I said, I love you all, Kirby. Y'all do an excellent job. I'm a Christian myself, conservative. And like I said, I listen to the gamut. I'm a political junkie. And like I said, I flip between you all and Mark Levin and the rest of the conservative gang, especially ones in Washington, Tony Perkins, you name it. But I am just, like I said, the Congressional Black Caucus has really shocked me, with how they have followed this president pretty much on everything, except for Utah, some of the newcomers, Neil Love, except for them, and Tim Scott out of Carolina. And just to listen to all of what is going on in this country, we have put a community organizer, someone 2-year senator, and no ROTC over everything and the effect that he's having on not just this country but the world. It goes back to the Netanyahu speech. When I think about that, I'm like, what were we thinking? And it's like, and then for them to vote him in there a second time. But like I said, God exalts and takes down kings, and like you all have mentioned so much, we just got to pray for them.
Tony, are you a little bit surprised that our cities are blowing up when we have the first black president?
I'm not surprised. The reason why I'm not surprised, as far as he is concerned, because like I said, I read a lot of the little bit that we know about his bio, especially with the 2 books, Dreams of My Father and Audacity of Hope. And it was pretty much telling, because I'm kind of somewhat of a history buff when it comes down to Marxism, socialism, and communism, because I was in the military during the time when the wall was up, because I'm 57 years old, okay? And I was there when the wall was up before the Pope, Miguel Gorbachev, and Reagan and then Margaret Thatcher and them got them to bring Gorbachev to bring their wall down. So I've got somewhat of some backdrop of what communism and socialism is all about. But a lot of minorities do not. You can actually ask some of the young, especially young ones. They're clueless to this kind of stuff. They're clueless to what a liberal is. They're clueless. They don't know this. And a lot of people fail to understand. And that's why they're so far left with the Democrats, especially with, things with the handouts and whatever. When you sit there and you got a poorly educated populace, this is what you get. That's just the bottom line.
I know. It's really a shame and a crime. So, Tony, tell us about your education. You call in a lot. I'm curious.
Well, believe it or not, I don't have a degree in anything.
You just read a lot and study things.
I read a lot, and believe it or not, you know what my biggest problem was when I was coming up? I was afraid of tests.
Yeah, a lot of people are.
And then I have people today, they say, well, with as much as you know about politics, you should have gotten into political science. And I said, well, I guess that, because I was in the military, but like I said, I enjoyed myself. I traveled the world and whatever. But I paid attention. And I'm from Mobile, Alabama. And my mom brought us up about not having to hate people and all that kind of, God don't like ugly. All that stuff. That's how we came up. And like I said, and then to see what's happening in our country today, where you got a president, they're sitting there, and it's almost like they're playing a game of divide and conquer. And then it's like a lot of people don't see it, And like I said, when Kelly Shackelford and Kirby, you all get together on a Friday and y'all be putting this stuff out there, and I be saying, this is the rich information that the minority neighborhoods need to know. They want to know why what's going on in their neighborhood. Look at your history. First of all, you got to go back in order to move forward. That's just cut and dry.
Yeah, that's really true. We need to learn from history. Well, Tony, thank you for calling in. It was good to talk to you.
Likewise.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are Point of View. We're running into the end of the show. I'm going to take one more call here. James from Missouri. Hi, James. Thanks for waiting.
Hello, I want to speak the thing that I heard about an hour and 15 minutes ago.
You waited a long time.
Yeah. This woman was telling about all the different churches that were standing in support of this gay marriage thing.
There are churches that do, but I think you have a different point, don't you?
Yeah. The point I want to make is that when you throw out names like Methodist, Presbyterian, Lutheran, Baptist, I don't know much about the other denominations. I'm a Southern Baptist, and in 1972, when I went to college, there was over 150 Baptist denominations separate from each other. And if you throw the word out Baptist, somebody needs to identify which Baptists they're talking about.
You're right. Thank you for pointing that out. The Southern Baptists have been one of the strongest denominations standing against this whole agenda that's moving us toward same-sex marriage. And so I'm so proud of them. And, you know, when you say Presbyterian, well, yes, the Presbyterian USA Church has now, you know, made some unfortunate decisions, but the PCA is strong. And, you know, you can go on and on. So we do need to thank you for bringing that forward and clarifying that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, James. That's James. Thanks so much for your call. Everybody, thanks for calling today. This has been a fun show because we've kind of gone around the gamut of topics. And so I'll encourage you tomorrow to join us for our weekend edition. Kelly Shackelford will be in the studio. His colleague, Jeff Mateer, was at the Supreme Court, and we got to have him give a report on Tuesday after the hearings, after the oral arguments. But Kelly will give some analysis and help us to see how to look at this. I think one of the things that we will be discussing, of course, is the comments by the Solicitor General of the United States, that's the top attorney of the U.S., where he said that there are concerns, especially if same-sex marriage is made the law of the land. There will be concerns about rights of churches, even tax-exempt status, things like that. I mean, he had to answer that. He was asked that by one of the justices, and there will be concerns. And so we will talk about those religious liberty concerns. I mean, we already are facing them now. Katie barred the door if same-sex marriage is approved and if it's forced on us. And so we'll do that. And we'll have lots of other topics, I'm sure. So please join us then. And thank you so much for joining us today. I want to mention, again, our website, pointofview.net, not only for all the resources that are there, the articles that go with the guests that we had today, but also the donate button. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we are a listener-supported ministry. We depend on the gifts of our listeners to keep us broadcasting every day and providing the information that you need to basically know how to think about what's swirling around us today. So if you can help us, we would appreciate that you do that. Also, I want to say thank you to Catherine for producing the show. There was a lot to do. And also to Chris, also Shamila, and to Andrew. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
Who would you say is the key to revival in America? Would you say it's unbelievers turning from their sin? 2 Chronicles 7:14 seems to say it's Christians God is looking at before granting an awakening. You probably know it. God says, if my people, the ones called by my name, humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. God doesn't expect those without His Spirit to lead the way. He's looking at us. So, did you pray today? Did you pray for America? Point of View Radio urges you to visit our website and get your free copy of our new booklet, Pray for America. When you do, we'll also send you updates on special needs to pray for, like the Supreme Court. Visit our website. Look for the Pray for America picture on the right side of our homepage, pointofview.net, pointofview.net. Join people all across this land and pray for America. Visit right now, pointofview.net. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.